Okay, class. I think that's actually recording. Yep. Okay, today we're going to be talking about FDR and the New Deal. We've been dealing with the Great Depression. So we're going to start with like a minute and a half of a video, okay? Part of the crash course, and then we'll just go over everything. I know, it's my favorite.
Well, let's say the United States has just plunged into the worst depression in its history, and you are the president of those same United States. What do you do? Well, if your name is Herbert Hoover, then you would say something about laissez-faire individualism and do nothing. If it's Herbert Hoover, then you're also going to be remembered for being wrong. So let's skip ahead a few years and say now you're Franklin Roosevelt. You have a much better idea, which you call the New Deal. This program ran from 1933 to 35 and broke down into three goals: relief, recovery, and reform. It all started with what became known as the first 100 days, during which Congress passed an unprecedented amount of legislation. First up was a banking holiday. For 2 days, every bank across the country was shut down and investigated. The well-behaved banks were then allowed to reopen, while the rest were put under government control. The government then put some broad restrictions over the banks, while also creating the FDIC, which would act as insurance for banking deposits. These two measures were designed to restore Americans' confidence in the banking system. Also aimed at restoring confidence were FDR's fireside chats, which he spoke weekly to the American people through the radio in a reassuring voice and told them what was going on. More practical was the so-called alphabet soup of new government agencies that sprang up. In no particular order, there was the Public Works Administration, which paid people to rebuild roads, the Civilian Conservation Corps, which paid younger people to plant trees, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which built hydroelectric dams in Tennessee, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which helped farmers by paying them to not farm, and the National Recovery Administration, which placed productive regulation on industry, just to name a few. But as it turned out, all that wasn't enough. Roosevelt then launched the second New Deal.
Okay, now we're not going to be talking about the second New Deal today. We've got enough on our hands with one. Okay, so who can tell me when the Great Depression started? We just were covering this.
1929.
1929, awesome. And you guys, well, I guess I already have it up there. Herbert Hoover was our president during this time, right? So he had been, the election was coming up in 1932, and at this point there was still a 20% unemployment rate. So for Herbert Hoover, things weren't looking good. He had his entire term to do something about the Great Depression, and his policies obviously weren't working, and he didn't really try to enforce many. So Franklin D. Roosevelt just swooped right in. He was a kind of unknown governor from New York. He was part of the Democratic Party, and ironically, he was somebody who never really experienced the hardships of the Great Depression that most people were experiencing. He grew up in a more upper-class, wealthy home. He went to elite schools, elite colleges. So it was kind of ironic in that sense. He married later Eleanor Roosevelt, which was, I think, his fifth cousin, off the top of my head. Apparently that was okay back then. And he served as Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of the Navy in 1920. But in 1921, it kind of put a pause in his political career, because he had an accident. He fell into some cold water in the Atlantic Ocean, and he was then diagnosed with polio, and he never fully recovered from this polio. But as far as he didn't gain control of his legs again. So his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, kind of became his eyes and ears, and instead of him going out to different groups to meet with them, he often sent her. She was very politically involved. Okay, so his platform that he ran on was a New Deal for the American people. That may sound familiar to you guys in light of current events, but we'll talk about that later. So his policies his whole idea was relief, recovery, and reform. One thing that he said during his campaign was that the country needs, and unless I mistake its temper, the country demands bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and to try it out, and if it fails, admit it frankly and try another, but above all, we must try something. And so this was huge because he was kind of poking at Herbert Hoover, saying, like, you're not really doing anything, and that he was going to take immediate action. So he pretty much believed in strong action and that the federal government needed to act more as a leader and to take control of the circumstances. And for Herbert Hoover, he claimed that this campaign is more than a contest between men. It is a contest between two philosophies of government. During his presidency, he kind of believed that the economy would kind of correct itself and that more of this laissez-faire government that we've talked about, there's a lot of parallels right here. He believed that relief should only come from state and local government and private agencies. So, needless to say, he lost his election, but he lost by more than 7 million votes. So, what we call, as he took, FDR took office, these first 100 days in office basically sums up his New Deal. He went straight in with this relief recovery reform. And this actually restored a lot of confidence among the people. And it kind of, the day after he was inaugurated, he called for a session with Congress and convinced them to pass all this legislation to get the ball rolling and just be on board with him. Try it. If it fails, try something else. So they also gave him control over banking systems. So what they started with was they did a 4-day bank holiday, where for 4 days they shut down the banks, and this was supposed to be an opportunity for banks who had all these runs and the finances were going crazy, couldn't keep track of where all the money was, to give them a chance to reorganize and pull themselves together before reopening. And before he reopened, before this 4 days was up, he had his first fireside chat. So these fireside chats is where he would get on the radio and, like he said, in a calm voice, tell them what he was doing, why he was doing it, and he was really just trying to be like, hey guys, we got this under control. So when they opened the banks again, they weren't having so many crazy runs on the banks. The people believed him and they were really encouraged by him. So yeah, this was really convincing. So I'm going to show you another short video that's about a minute. And in this video, you're going to see a lot of photos that were actually taken during the Great Depression, and we're going to hear from
savings of many years in thousands of families are gone. Only a foolish optimist can deny the dark realities of the moment. This nation is asking for action, and action now. Our greatest primary task is to put people to work. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort, the joy, the moral stimulation of work. Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
We don't really need to finish that. I just wanted you guys to hear from him because you guys can kind of probably get a grasp of how he was able to be so influential. So now we're going to get to kind of a dry, boring part. We're going to talk a lot about the different reforms that he did implement. So we're going to start with the FDIC because that's one that we probably at least have heard of if we don't really know what it's all about. Phones off in class, please. They created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is what the FDIC stands for, and this was implemented to insure bank deposits up to $5,000. So this also helped alleviate the stress of people coming and running on the banks and trying to pull out money that wasn't even there anymore, because basically the federal government was saying, we got your money. If the bank fails, we're going to still back you up. And this was also effective. Congress also established the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the SEC, and they basically wanted to regulate the stock market And they wanted to do this because they thought that they could encourage other people that they could start investing again in the stock market. People weren't investing in anything. They didn't want to because they thought their money was just going to disappear. So they also had to regulate trading practices, or that's what they chose to do. And most of all, we're just going to keep hearing how they kept doing this to ensure bank's confidence. And at this point, it was really effective. It was helping to stabilize, and it should say the stock market. I mean, obviously the economy was still in pieces, morally. So in our last class, we did talk about, a couple classes ago, we were talking about the causes of the Great Depression. And one of the groups that was hit really hard was farmers. There was this huge unbalance of supply and demand, where they were, with all the new technology, they're growing all these crops, but people don't have any buying power, and it's off. So they had all this extra stuff, and farmers weren't able to make a living. So they created the Agriculture Adjustment Act, the AAA, which the government provided financial aid to the farmers. He basically paid farmers to take part of their crops and either burn them, not to plant there, and he said, kill off your extra livestock. And for a lot of people, this was super immoral, and they were like, no, don't do this. But it was actually starting to be effective. They were starting to see rising prices. They had to get rid of that extra supply so that the demand and supply would kind of balance out. Okay. And then we have the TVA, AIDS Rural Southerners. So this is the Tennessee Valley Authority. So this provided aid to some of the nation's poorest people. They didn't have, in a lot of these areas, they didn't have proper sewage systems, electricity, or even running water. And so what they did was they went in, and this provided like a couple million jobs at least. And they built dams, which prevented flooding, so to mess with those bad sewage systems, and it generated power there. And they also worked in places to replace forests, build fertilizer plants. And this it attracted jobs and it attracted industry. However, throughout this entire New Deal, we're going to find there's a lot of critics. A lot of people thought, oh my gosh, this is a complete socialist idea, and it's getting direct control over these industries. And so a lot of people were like, we can't compete with the government. And so there was a lot of backfire on that. Promise we're getting there. So, we're almost there. Told you? Okay. So then we have the Civilian Conservation Corps. So this provided jobs. This was probably, we'll kind of skip over these other two. These are small ones. This one didn't even really matter in the end. So the CCC provided jobs to over 2 million young men. And this is huge because that's how the biggest part of the workforce is going to be young men. And what FDR, he called this his favorite. This was his favorite reform. It was to replant forests, build trails, I should say dig irrigation ditches, and fought fires. And at first it was a lot of white men, and they started to be more inclusive and add minorities and try to get everyone on board here. Skip over those. Okay. So then we have more legislation. This is the day for the new. Okay. So Homeowners Loan Corporation. This was loaning out money at low interest rates to homeowners who couldn't afford to pay on their mortgages. That was a lot of people. So this was keeping a lot of people in their homes. There was tons of foreclosures going on. We can imagine why. They're all unemployed. And so then we have this, you guys can see these other ones, I won't even have to read them. Except maybe the Public Works Administration. That's a big one. Because it built dams, bridges, power plants, and government buildings. And so, has anybody been to New York and seen the Triborough Bridge? Or anybody been to Miami and had to drive across the overseas highway that goes from Miami to Key West?
Well, I haven't had the pleasure, but I've seen plenty of movies and pictures of the overseas highway.
So yeah, I know what you're talking about. So that actually, those were built under the Public Works Administration. Okay. And finally, the central piece of this New Deal was the National Recovery Administration. He said that this was the most important and far-reaching legislation ever enacted by the American Congress. It developed codes for fair competition and to govern whole industries. So they wanted to place minimum wages for workers and then to set minimum prices for products. This was also hoping to ensure that people could start to have buying power and they could start purchasing what companies were producing, but that the companies could still make a profit, which was essential to getting the economy back on track. Okay. And so pretty much all this opposition was people were always saying he either was doing not enough or too much. The right was saying it had too much power to the government, too much direct control, it threatened individual freedoms, and Herbert Hoover, so the former president, even wrote in his book, Challenge to Liberty, that the New Deal was the most stupendous invasion of the whole spirit of liberty. Apparently his ideas were better. And then we have and they formed the American Liberty League in 1934, which included a lot of large business owners, probably the people in Tennessee who were like, we can't compete with you because you're phones. And then the left people were saying, this isn't enough, you're not doing enough. Okay, so this is a quick cartoon. We've got tons of them from this time period. Which do you think the left or right would have created this cartoon? What do you think is going on here?
Oh, definitely the right, because the Democratic symbol is a donkey, a jackass.
So I think it's saying the New Deal is a jackass.
And it references like the Trojan horse, where they sneak things within the New Deal that aren't appropriate to the Constitution.
Okay. So overstepping the individual rights.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're about to go through the Constitution of the United States. What do you guys think that's about?
Yep.
Any thoughts on that?
No.
No. Perfect.
Being a liberal.
Okay. So here's some things to think about. So a couple questions, and I'm gonna have you do a little quick search on your phones. Then you can pull your phones out. So, how did FDR's economic policies differ from those of Herbert Hoover? Just a quick review to make sure that people aren't sleeping in the back. It actually worked.
Herbert Hoover didn't want to do anything. He was laissez-faire. He wants the government to deliver their mail, and that's it. FDR, everything.
So completely.
Yes, complete intervention. Keynesian.
Okay, as long as we've got that, you guys can't possibly fail the exam later because you understand the direction of your policies. Okay. Why do you think that the Depression led to the development of such extreme proposals?
Because
desperate measures.
Desperate measures.
There are desperate times call for desperate situations.
Yep.
Perfectly summed up. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do real quick is I want you guys to pull out your phones. How many of you have heard recently, like on TV in the news, the New Deal? Anybody have heard that at all? Gonna go with no. Okay. So grab your phones and just type in the New Deal and click on your news tab and let's see if you guys can find anything on that.
Trump touts
Oh!
New Deal for Black America.
A New Deal for Black America. Okay. Is there anything like quick that you can get out of this real quick?
So Trump is probably saying that black Americans have not had the rights, kind of like those in depression, they're struggling with all this poverty, and that he wants to bring in a new deal that is going to help African Americans like it helped all Americans.
Yeah. It shows new tax incentives for the inner cities.
I find that rather
start companies that hire workers.
Rather ironic.
I mean, you know,
With
all
the
this
mouth.
from doing zero reading about it.
I just read it. It's right here.
And what did you say?
Me?
Yeah.
I said it includes new tax incentives for the inner city and started to bring companies that hire workers and plan to invest money to suspend like programs in the inner
Taxes,
city.
that's
Okay.
yeah.
And do you think that there's like
Shut up.
okay, so Trump has this idea going on, okay? We can disagree or agree with him. But why do you guys think that he's like referencing why do you think he's using the term the New Deal? Why do you think he's like going back to FDR? Like what
Because
he's
would
a liberal.
that be?
He's a liberal.
Well, because it's such a historical.
Democrats,
event that
Republicans love FDR because of what he did.
Yeah.
Trump being on the right needs to try to get some more moderates.
Hey, he's only down 2 points now.
And if you can make a liberal reference.
Right? You can kind of pull together.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And obviously like we heard his speech, he was so inspirational. He was able to calm people down, make people believe that everything was good, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I just want you guys to continuously make parallels. So, we'll kind of do some more discussion-based stuff on Monday. No homework for the night. And you're done.
Sweet.